Okay, waiting, and we've gone live. Hi, Elliot Fishman here. Hope everybody is doing well. Yes, I did get a haircut. When the person who cut my hair, who's been cutting it for probably 40 years, Angel, said, you haven't gotten a haircut in 4 months. But I did like that wild, crazy hair look. But anyway, for at least for a few days, it'll look kind of cleaned up and everything. Hope everybody's doing well. May 29th, a funny end of May, right? It's been kind of cool if you're on the East Coast. It's been kind of wet if you're on the East Coast. Hopefully it'll get better. I know we'll be complaining soon. It's too hot, so I really never complain. Anyway, this topic today is CT of the adrenal. We are writing some papers on the adrenal. We have some new lectures on the adrenal. Last night I actually just coincidentally read a few articles on the adrenal. So let me just go through a few basic things, and probably what I'll do is I'll come back with part two of the adrenal. If not next week, maybe in a couple weeks. So adrenal lesions are very common. The older the patient, the more likely you're going to have an incidentaloma, probably 10% in patients over 60, increased incidence in patients with thyroid disease and diabetes and obesity and female. The thing about most adrenal lesions, they're benign adenomas. What's an adenoma? To call something an adenoma, from a CT perspective, is a lesion under 4 centimeters, sharply defined, and when you measure it on non-contrast scans, it measures under 10 Hounsfield units. Sometimes it measures negative numbers, sometimes it measures water, but it's very low CT attenuation. Now, the one trick that sometimes will be said is, well, you see a lesion, it looks okay, but does the patient have any symptoms? Now, you could say, well, the patient had no symptoms. It was an incidental finding. But many adrenal lesions, I'm not talking about PHEOs, which are higher density and hypertension, but you can be mildly cushingoid. There's a lot of different elevated adrenal functions that you only would know if you drew adrenal functions. So some people, and particularly the endocrinologists, will say that, and this is true particularly in Europe, that if you have a CT scan that's incidental adrenal finding, that means it looks benign or it looks like an adenoma on CT, but you still need to draw adrenal functions, because how do you know it's not a hyperfunctioning lesion? And remember, size alone is not a great thing, and you say that patients with adrenal cortical carcinomas are 3 to 20 centimeters, but I've seen several that are 1 cm or 1.5 cm in 30-ish-year-old women who are cushingoid. The most common presentation of adrenal cancer is Cushing's. If you present early with symptoms of Cushing's, like mustache or just symptoms that really push you to Cushing's, you could pick up an adrenal cancer that's only 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters, and you could be cured, right? You resect it. There's not even any need for chemotherapy. They're relatively low-grade tumors. So when the endocrinologists speak, they talk about getting functions on literally everybody, every incidental lesion, because if not, how do you know it's not hyperfunctioning? There's no way to tell that by looking at the CT. However, most people in the US, including us, if you see an adrenal lesion that's incidental and it's under 3, even under 4 cm, water density, you're going to say most consistent with adenoma. Okay. Now, not every lesion is under 10. You don't need to have an adenoma to be under 10 Hounsfield units. And that's when we talk about the adrenal washout. So what do? You give 100 cc's of contrast. Before you give the contrast, you have a non-contrast scan. You measure the adrenal. It's 35. Now, 35 could be an adenoma if it doesn't really enhance. It could be an enhancing adenoma that washes out more than 60%. I'll explain that in a minute. Or 35 can become 170, and this could be a pheochromocytoma, just to give you the whole spectrum. So I'm sitting with a 35 Hounsfield unit lesion. I give IV contrast. I scan at 60 seconds. I measure it. And then I scan at 15 minutes and I measure it. So what am I doing? I'm looking at the washout. Now, benign lesions have a better washout than malignant lesions. But the key thing you're looking for is a washout of 60%. So if it goes from 35 to, let's say, 95, and then it drops back to under 60, it's a washout of 60%. It means it's benign. Now, there are several tricks. One is, and let me have a little bit of water, that 60% washout, which you call normal, there's an exception to the rule, and that's with pheochromocytomas. Remember, pheos get really bright, so it can go from 35 to 165 and then wash out to 50. That's a 70% washout. So if something enhances at 60 seconds more than 120 Hounsfield units, you have to be suspicious for pheochromocytoma. Then you'll get the lab values and you'll make certain the patient does not have a pheochromocytoma. Very, very straightforward. So there is that one exception. And it's interesting, when you looked at the original articles, they would say, well, we didn't discuss pheos because everyone knows what a pheo is, patient's hypertensive. Well, it ends up that 15% or more of pheos are incidental findings. So not everybody with pheo is symptomatic or diagnosed as symptomatic. So that's one of the rules in terms of the washout. 60%, unless it goes above 120, then you're in pheo territory, and you have to work it up for that. Now you can ask the question, does every lesion washouts, every adenoma wash out more than 60%? 80 to 90% will wash out 60%. 10 to 20% will not. So on the washout value, you still may not get the perfect diagnosis. It may be indeterminate, and then you do lab values. If the lab values are negative, the lesion looks benign based on shape and appearance, then you'll simply follow the lesion. Now, we talk about adrenal carcinoma, that's what you worry about, right? But they're usually larger, but not always, but the small ones are functioning. They're hyperfunctioning, as I mentioned, most commonly going to be Cushing's. So if you're asymptomatic and all your lab values are negative, you could make the assumption that you're dealing with an adenoma. Now, other lesions like metastasis have variable appearances. You can have very bright metastases that look like pheos from renal cell carcinoma, particularly clear cell, but then you have a clear cell you're looking at, so that's not going to be a difficult scenario. Other lesions can be somewhat vascular, melanoma, hepatoma, two of them that come to mind, but they're usually larger, often bilateral, and you see extra adrenal findings as well. So that's really how I like to think about these incidentalomas. And I remember writing a paper on incidentalomas way back when, with Bob, what was his name? He became chair at Yale. I'm blocking out his name. Very famous endocrinologist, really good guy. Not that good a basketball player, however, at least in my prime. I could whoop him. But nevertheless, it's a very, very important diagnosis. And you're going to see it all the time. If you're reading 50 cases a day and 10% of patients have adrenal lesions, no matter what your age of your population, unless you're a pediatric radiologist, you're going to see 2, 3, or 4 lesions. So know how to manage them, know how to dictate them, and know how you need to go about doing them. So let me see here if anyone had any comments. I don't see any comments. Now, one thing we know is that on the Facebook Live, just to tell people this, it used to be that Facebook Live with these lectures or these little videos we do would stay on forever. Now they disappear at 30 days. That's the new rules by Microsoft, which by Facebook rather, which is fine. Remember, all of these we will put on YouTube when we finish with them, and so we have these Facebook Live YouTube thing. So it really works out well. You can see them there. Plus, the truth is, if you don't watch me in the next day or so, you know how many different messages you get on your Facebook page, right? Those who use Facebook. It's going to be way down. If I'm on the 100th floor, it's going to be in the minus 100th floor. So, just remember that you can always find us. It'll be on Facebook, but it'll be on YouTube after. Let me see, Hassan Karabi. How can adrenal lesion be distinguished from an accessory spleen? Well, when you look, you know where the adrenal is, and the lesion comes off the adrenal, so that part's pretty easy. Accessory spleens are typically near the splenic hilum or closer to the tail of the pancreas, so it's not going to be an issue. I have seen a couple of incidental adrenal lesions, or what look like adrenal lesions, be accessory spleens. The gimmick is they enhance more homogeneously, and they enhance identical to the spleen. So if there's something near the spleen but it's separate, take a look at what you're going to be dealing with. So that's not typically a problem. So I hope that helps. And we have some really nice cases of the adrenal. If you go to CTisus, our website, thousands of cases with adrenal examples. And I have given a number of lectures over the last couple of years on the adrenal, showing you the malignant, the benign. And what we'll do next time, I think, and I know Lily is listening, we'll do part 2 of the adrenal, and we'll say adrenal masses over 4 centimeters. When you get over 4, you kind of worry those are large masses, though in truth only a third, or to be exact, 31% in the Mayo Clinic article are actually going to be malignant. So even when things are larger, over 4 cm, only about 1/3 are going to be malignant. So let's do that. Let's stop here. I got to go back and read some more scans. It's been a long day. I was at the NIH yesterday speaking about pancreatic cancer and early detection at a meeting on early detection of pancreatic cancer. It's amazing the security at the NCI, which is, in Rockville, but it was fine. That took me a while to get in, but I made it in. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. I think I answered all the questions. And Lily did put up a link on YouTube where you can find all of our Facebook Live. So that makes it easy. And with that, I wish everybody a great day. Bye, guys.